the Lavender Empire. Born into a powerful, wealthy family, Emma Carter is the female heir to a Lavender Empire. Yet she carries the heavy burden of her own bloodline. Ignored, mocked, and forced into an unwanted marriage, Emma faces a choice: obey her family's demands or lose everything. But what if the only place she's sent for punishment is exactly where she finds salvation? Can a shy, forgotten girl rewrite her destiny and rise above the very family who cast her aside? What secrets lie hidden within the lavender fields? Share your thoughts below, like this video, and subscribe to discover the answers. Amidst the glittering heart of San Francisco, the annual Carter Family Gala was in full swing. The hallways of the Carter Manor shimmered like molten gold under the glow of colossal candles. Mirrored walls mercilessly reflected the opulence, as if the very wealth was mocking those who didn't fit the aristocratic mold. The Carter family, lords of vast lavender fields spanning California, gathered to forge alliances through marriage, bound by an unwritten law no one dared defy. By 28, you married into the right family, or proved your worth, or you were cut off, stripped of your family assets, and left to the whispers of disdain. It was a masquerade of false appearances, of gilded lies, and amidst all the faces expertly painted to hide their duplicity, there she was, Emma Carter, 27, standing alone in the crowd, her curvaceous figure and timid expression a magnet for cruel jests. Her cousin, Sophia, with her sharp, radiant voice, sneered, "Who would want her waddling down the aisle? At that size, whoever gets her won't need a bodyguard." The room erupted in laughter, each giggle a dagger to Emma's heart. Her mother gone, her father consumed by his work, Emma had grown up in the shadow of family expectations, every step judged, every breath a reminder of her supposed failures. As the chandeliers sparkled, she slipped away from the party, retreating to her room with tear-filled eyes, shedding the tight dress, and facing herself in the mirror. She didn't hate herself, but the world seemed determined to teach her to. The next morning, the grand office of James Carter reeked of polished oak and old money. Emma stood before her father's desk, her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. Her father, the patriarch of the Carter dynasty, sat in his leather chair, his sharp eyes fixed on her with cold calculation. "Emma," he began, his voice a low, authoritative rumble, cutting through the silence. "You've brought nothing to this family. No accomplishments, no talent, no value to the family name." The scathing words, each one an echo of the whispers she had endured at the gala, the mocking laughter of her cousins still ringing in her ears. He leaned forward, hands clasped like a judge delivering a sentence. "You will marry Jack Thompson, the son of the Napa farm manager. You'll move there, manage the lavender fields, and prove you're not the burden everyone thinks you are." Emma held her breath, her throat tightening as she processed his words. "Father, I don't even know him," she said, her voice trembling, almost a whisper, eyes fixed on the floor to avoid his piercing gaze. The thought of marrying a stranger, the son of a farmhand, felt like a chain tightening around her future. She thought of the life she knew, sheltered, privileged, yet suffocated by the weight of family expectations. James's expression didn't soften, and his voice sharpened, like a blade honed by years of wielding power. "Thompson saved my life in a fire years ago. This is how we repay the debt. You have a choice, Emma, but you'll lose everything: your trust fund, the Carter name, the security of this family, and survive on your own out there." The words landed like stones, each one crushing her fragile confidence. Emma's mind reeled, picturing a world outside the Carter estate, a world she'd never stepped into, where her inexperience would leave her vulnerable, lost. She'd never held a job, never paid a bill, never faced the harsh realities outside her gilded cage. The thought terrified her, and James knew it, his silence a calculated pressure, challenging her choice. Her hands clasped together, knuckles white as she struggled to find her voice. "Father, please," she pleaded, her voice begging. "I don't want this marriage." But James leaned back, his eyes narrowed, a a faint smirk betraying his certainty that she wouldn't resist. "It's destiny, Emma." The finality in his voice was suffocating. A verdict without appeal. Emma felt the office walls closing in, the paintings of lavender fields mocking her with the promise of a freedom she had never known. As she turned to leave, her footsteps echoed on the polished floor, each one heavy with her father's ultimatum. The door closed behind her, and she paused, eyes brimming with tears, staring out the window at the city below, a world both vast and distant. Napa Valley stretched out in a sea of lavender, purple blossoms swaying under the golden California sun, their scent a fleeting promise of peace. Emma Carter stepped out of the sleek car, her city dress awkwardly clinging, her eyes darting nervously as she took in the rustic farmhouse before her. She clutched her purse, a shield against this unfamiliar world, her heart heavy. She was here to marry a stranger, Jack Thompson, the farm manager's son, a man she'd never met, a life she'd never chosen. The thought twisted her stomach. She was a Carter, born into wealth, yet cast off to this remote outpost like a discarded heirloom. Her shyness intensified, her steps hesitant as she approached the weathered porch, where a young man in work boots and a faded flannel shirt waited, his posture relaxed yet attentive. Jack Thompson, with eyes that held a quiet intelligence, stepped forward, his voice soft but steady. "Ms. Carter, I'm Jack. Welcome to Napa. I'll help you get settled." His tone was professional, warm, but Emma stiffened, her voice barely audible as she mumbled, "I don't want to be here. I had no choice." The words came out, sharp with resentment, yet tinged with the gentle honesty that was her hallmark. Jack nodded, his expression unperturbed, as if he'd anticipated her reluctance. He gestured toward the farm, keeping his distance to ease her discomfort. "I understand," he said, his voice low. "This isn't your plan or mine. Our fathers arranged this, but we don't have to play by their rules. Just go through the motions, husband and wife, for their benefit. No pressure, no expectations. We'll be friends, nothing more." He paused, looking at her with a sincerity that surprised her. Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her eyes remained wary, searching his face for any hint of deceit. She nodded, a small, reluctant gesture, whispering, "Okay, friends." Jack offered a faint smile, then turned to lead her inside, gesturing to the lavender fields with a simple answer. "This is what keeps this place alive." Inside the humble farmhouse, a stark contrast to her family's opulent estate, wooden floors creaked beneath their feet, the furniture worn yet inviting. Emma's anxiety lingered, but Jack's quiet respect began to erode her defenses. He showed her to a small room and said, "This room is yours. I'll take the couch." The modest yet thoughtful gesture stirred something within her, a faint spark of hope in a world where she'd had little to none. As they stepped back onto the porch, the lavender fields glowed in the fading light, and Emma felt a strange pull, a glimmer of potential in a place she'd never wanted to be. The Napa farmhouse hummed with a quiet rhythm, its walls infused with the faint sweetness of lavender drifting through open windows. In Jack's cluttered basement-turned-makeshift laboratory, Emma Carter descended slowly, standing over a workbench strewn with vials, essential oils glinting in the soft morning light. Her fingers trembled as she lifted a vial of lavender extract, her nose detecting a symphony of floral notes, herbaceous, fresh, earthy, that no one else seemed to notice. She inhaled deeply, her shyness momentarily forgotten, replaced by a spark of curiosity she'd never dared to explore. Jack Thompson, sleeves rolled up, scribbled notes beside her, a chemist's precision a stark contrast to her newfound wonder. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers as she set the vial down, her voice hesitant yet alive. "I can tell them apart," she said, almost to herself. "The scents, they're different, like stories in each drop." Jack's pen stilled, his face lighting up with genuine surprise, his voice warm but steady. "That's rare, Emma. You're picking up on nuances most perfumers take years to grasp." Have you ever thought of creating something from it? The question hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in encouragement. Emma's cheeks flushed, her usual self-consciousness creeping in. But Jack's steady gaze held none of the ridicule she'd experienced from her family. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. I've never been good at anything. No one ever thought I could be. The confession came out, raw and unguarded. A glimpse into the wounds she carried from years of family disdain. Jack leaned against the table, his voice soft but firm, like a friend seeing more than she did. You're wrong, he said. You have a gift, Emma. Let's try. He handed her another vial, his fingers brushing hers, a moment of connection that made her heart skip a beat. They began to experiment, Emma blending scents with an instinct she didn't know she possessed, Jack calibrating formulas with a chemist's skill. The air filled with the delicate dance of lavender, bright top notes, warm bass notes, a fragrance that felt like freedom. As they worked, the laboratory became a sanctuary, a place where Emma's quiet voice grew steadier. She pointed to a concoction, her words hesitant but sure. This one, it's like the fields at twilight, soft yet strong. Jack nodded, scribbling notes, his smile a quiet affirmation. That's it. We can build something with this. For the first time, Emma felt a flicker of pride, a sense that she could be more than the burden her family saw. The vials glittered like possibilities, each one a step further from the shadow of her past. As sunlight streamed into the room, illuminating their work, Emma glanced at Jack, his focus mirroring her own. In this small, fragrant space, she began to believe she could belong not just here, but to herself. 1 year later, the Napa farmhouse glowed with twinkling lights, its walls imbued with the sweet fragrance of lavender as twilight settled over the valley. In a corner of the living room, now a bustling creative hub, Emma Carter and Jack Thompson hunched over a table laden with glass bottles, labels scrawled with hurried notes. Their first perfume batch, Lavender Haven, was nestled in elegant glass vials, each one a testament to their shared vision. Emma capped a bottle, her fingers now steadier, her shyness replaced by a quiet confidence. This one's perfect, she said, her voice carrying a newfound strength, like the fields after a rain. Jack, with the precision of a pharmacist guiding their work, checked a spreadsheet on his laptop, a triumphant grin on his face. Orders are pouring in, he said, his voice bright but careful. It's incredible, Emma. JA is growing like crazy. We've secured more investors and can now fully acquire these lavender fields. The room had expanded with modern equipment, the glow of success warming the air. Emma glanced at Jack, his focus unwavering as he labeled a sample vial, and felt a shift within her. They had lived as friends, honoring their pact, Jack on the couch, Emma in her room, a fragile but the safest distance she'd ever known. But the hours spent blending scents, sharing quiet laughter, and dreaming of a future beyond the farm had woven a bond deeper than expected. Emma's heart pounded as she set a bottle down, her voice soft but resolute. Jack, she said, her eyes meeting his. I don't want us to pretend anymore. I want this us to be real. No more separate rooms. The words hung between them, bold yet tender, a leap she never thought she'd take. Jack's eyes softened, a wide smile spreading across his face as he stepped closer and pulled her into a tight embrace. I was hoping you'd say that, he replied, his voice warm, a promise in every syllable. They shared their first kiss, electricity sparking between them, their bond now a love as natural as the lavender outside. The world outside the farm was buzzing, the weight of a secret empire and a blossoming love anchoring them. Lavender Haven wasn't just a brand, it was their rebellion, a defiance against the family that had cast Emma aside. Each passing day was a step forward, towards the free future they had built together. As night fell, the valley hushed to the rustling of lavender in the wind, and Emma felt for the first time that she wasn't just existing. She was thriving, her heart full of energy, her purpose clear, in a home that belonged to her in every important way. For the past 5 years, the Napa farmhouse had been a haven of quiet victories, but now it hummed with an undercurrent of fear. Emma Carter and Jack Thompson stood in the living room, their faces etched with worry, the glow of their blossoming love overshadowed by a looming threat. Outside, the lavender fields swayed under a gray sky, as if sensing the storm gathering on the horizon. Emma clutched a letter from the Carter family, its words cold and definitive. The Napa farm, their home, their sanctuary, was to be sold. The buyer, Richard Hayes, a ruthless real estate mogul, intended to raise the fields for a luxury resort, displacing the farmers who had toiled there for decades. Emma's voice trembled as she read aloud, "They're selling it all, everything we've built." Her eyes, once alight with the pride of Lavender Haven, now shimmered with fear. She turned to Jack, her partner in love and enterprise, and whispered, "What about the workers? Their families? This is their home too." Jack's jaw tightened, his calm replaced by a quiet resolve, but his hand trembled slightly as he folded a map of the farm. In the distance, the rumble of Hayes's convoy echoed, a stark reminder of the power they were up against. Emma's mind flashed back to the San Francisco gala, where her cousin Sophia's cruel taunts had branded her a burden. Now, standing on the farm, she felt that burden again, but heavier. Her failure could destroy not only her dream but the livelihoods of hundreds of families. She strode to the window, watching the workers tending to the lavender, oblivious to the axe about to fall. "I told them at the meeting," she said, her voice choked. "These people have given their lives to this land." She recalled Sophia's sneer. "You're just a manager. Emma, stay in your place." The memory stung, fueling her determination. Jack stepped to her side, his presence a steady anchor, and said, "J.A. is looking at options. We'll find a way." Emma nodded, clinging to his words, though doubt gnawed at her. Could they possibly fight against Hayes's colossal empire? The air grew heavy as they sat at the kitchen table. The faces of the workers flashed in Emma's mind. Old Miguel, who had taught her the rhythm of the harvest. Young Clara, who dreamed of college. "We can't let Hayes destroy this place," she said, her voice resolute with a defiance she was just beginning to understand. Jack's eyes met hers, a silent vow exchanged between them. They weren't just fighting for the farm. They were fighting for the life they had built together, for the people who had believed in them when her family hadn't. As the sun dipped below the lavender fields, casting long shadows, Emma felt a flicker of hope amidst the fear. A chance, however slim, to rewrite this story. As the bidding day neared, Assistant Anna's face glowed under the screen, whispering, "J.A. has entered the bid with a promise to retain all workers. Hayes is losing ground." Emma's heart pounded, but the fear lingered. A leak of information could unravel everything. She stepped outside, addressing the workers gathered in the twilight, their faces etched with worry. "Trust us," she said, her voice carrying a strength she was just beginning to find. "Someone is fighting for this farm, for all of you." Back in the warehouse, they launched a social media campaign, Anna's fingers flying across the keyboard, posting about the legacy of the lavender fields. Hashtags flooded the internet, rallying strangers to their cause, exposing the unscrupulous developer Hayes. The response was overwhelming: shares, comments, a groundswell of support that was an undeniable pressure. They had staked everything on this, their love and their empire entwined in the fight. When Anna's triumphant shout pierced the air, "J.A.'s bid is winning. Hayes is out," the warehouse erupted. Emma let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling with the weight of the gamble. Outside, the lavender fields glowed under the starlight, a symbol of what they were protecting. Not just land, but lives, dreams, a future they'd built from scratch. The workers' chatter grew, filled with rising hope. Emma clutched Jack's hand, her heart thrumming with fear and triumph. They hadn't just saved the farm. They were rewriting their story, proving the Carters wrong in a way no one could have predicted. Now, in the Carter family office in San Francisco, once a symbol of unyielding power, it lay in disarray, its polished surfaces buried under stacks of unpaid bills and failed contracts. James Carter hunched over his desk, his tailored suit rumpled, his face etched with the strain of a crumbling dynasty. The Lavender Empire, the very foundation of the Carter name, was fading, drained by the reckless ventures of his favored heirs. Sophia, his garrulous niece, paced the room, her designer heels clicking against the floor, her voice arrogant despite the chaos. "Those real estate deals were supposed to save us," she snapped, throwing a report onto the desk. "How did we lose so much?" James's weary but desperate eyes were glued to the paperwork, his mind racing for a lifeline. The family's projects, Sophia's high-rise condos, her cousin's expensive developments, had collapsed under their own weight, leaving the Carters on the brink of bankruptcy. Ironically, they had abandoned their ancestral legacy, chasing after so-called industry and modernity, only to wither away. In contrast, a mysterious individual chose to preserve those legacies, including their own Napa fields. And now they found themselves forced to seek their help. James leaned forward, his voice hoarse but firm. "This buyer, this anonymous investor, they treat the farmers better than we ever did. Find them. We need their capital to save what's left." Sophia scoffed, her lip curling in disdain. "Just another mogul trying to muscle in." James nodded to his assistant, Lucas, who stood quietly by the door. "Find that mysterious investor with utmost urgency, by any means necessary. Arrange a meeting." The room grew heavy, the atmosphere thick with the irony of a family who had once mocked its weakest link now scrambling for salvation. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious to the Carter downfall. James stared at a faded painting of the Napa lavender fields, a legacy he had once taken for granted. His mind drifted to Emma, his discarded daughter, sent to Napa as a punishment, a way to repay an old debt. He dismissed the thought, unable to imagine her as anything but a disappointment. Sophia's voice cut in, impatient. "This investor better be serious or we're toast." The weight of her words pressed down on James, a man who had built an empire but failed to see its cracks. As Lucas left to arrange the meeting, the office fell silent, the quiet a prelude to a family's collapse. The San Francisco skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of a sleek, modern office, its minimalist elegance a stark contrast to the crumbling Carter empire. Inside, a polished table held a single bottle of Lavender Haven, its label reflecting the morning light, a silent symbol of triumph. Emma Carter stood tall, her former timidity replaced by a quiet power, her eyes steady on the door. Jack Thompson, her partner in love and rebellion, stood beside her, his calm demeanor masking the weight of the moment. The air seemed to freeze as Anna, their loyal assistant, ushered in James Carter, his face haggard with despair, his suit rumpled from sleepless nights. He stepped into the room, expecting an unknown tycoon, but then froze as his gaze landed on Emma. "Emma?" He choked, his voice a mix of disbelief and dawning realization. "You're the anonymous buyer?" Emma's lips curved into a faint, resolute smile, her voice clear and steady. "Yes, father. Jack and I built Lavender Haven. We bought back the Napa farm and many others because someone had to protect what you were willing to throw away." The sleek, modern office in San Francisco suddenly felt stifling. James Carter stumbled backward, his hand gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only lifeline in the surging tide of truth. Every word Emma uttered was a cut to his long-held confidence, a judgment on a lifetime. The daughter he had disowned, labeled a burden, and forced into a marriage for an old debt, now stood before him, not as a weak child but as the architect of an entirely new empire, one that James, with all his wisdom and power, had never been able to conceive or understand. Anger and shock warred in James's eyes. He had dismissed Emma, seeing her as a valueless pawn in the family game. Now, that pawn had overturned his own game board. Jack Thompson stepped forward, his voice low but firm with unshakable resolve. "We used every penny from Lavender Haven to save the farm. The workers, the fields, they're safe now." Emma's gaze met her father's directly, without a flicker of evasion. Her voice was steady, but it carried the weight of years of being overlooked and underestimated. You abandoned me. You and the family saw me as a burden. But I have to thank you for bringing me to Jack. Together, we've built something real, something you never had. She gestured to the bottle of lavender haven on the table, its gentle scent a testament to their defiance and freedom. I will take care of you and the elders, ensuring your comfortable twilight years. But the Carter legacy has rotted, built on greed and contempt. We won't save it, and it can't be saved anymore. It doesn't need to exist. Emma's words were a final verdict, severing any remaining thin threads. All the years he had spent chasing power and reputation, building an empire on selfishness and imposition, had ultimately collapsed because of the very people he had chosen to dismiss. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His pride shattered, his contempt turned to shame, and the realization that all his judgments of Emma had been tragically wrong. He could only nod, a reluctant nod, but one filled with respect and even surrender. The office suddenly felt terrifyingly vast, the silence heavy with the truths he had so long deliberately ignored. Emma's gaze softened, not with full forgiveness, but with a sense of closure. She had found peace and strength within herself, without needing her father's validation. She took Jack's hand, their bond a quiet anchor in the storm of the moment. As James turned to leave, his shoulders slumped, the figure of a man who had not only lost an empire but also his belief in his own worth. He stared out the window, where the San Francisco skyline glittered. A world he once commanded now seemed to mock his blindness. Napa Valley stretched out in a breathtaking expanse of lavender, fields reaching towards the horizon, purple blossoms dancing under the golden sunset. The farmhouse, once a place of unease, now stood as a beacon of resilience, its porch filled with the laughter of workers and their families. Emma Carter and Jack Thompson walked hand in hand through the rows of lavender, their faces glowing with quiet pride. The air carried the scent of lavender haven, a perfume that had become a global symbol of beauty and defiance. The farm, saved from ruin, flourished as a community hub, where workers were not just employees but partners in a shared dream. A wooden sign stood at the edge of the farm, its carved words gleaming, "Where you are unseen, you can still bloom." Emma paused, her eyes sweeping over the fields, her heart full of a life she had never imagined. Memories of the San Francisco Gala, where she was mocked, and her father's office, where she was dismissed, now faded before the reality she had built. Jack squeezed her hand, his smile a reminder of their journey, from strangers bound by duty to lovers who rewrote their destiny. As the sun dipped lower, bathing the valley in warm light, the fields seemed to whisper of a lasting legacy. Emma and Jack stood together, their love and their work intertwined, a promise to the land and its people. This was their haven, a testament that even the forgotten can blossom.